All right, we got our Glock here. How exciting, how original. We're gonna go over the 4 universal firearm safety rules. Don't throw guns. And then we're gonna go over how to prove this thing safe so we can get to handling it, dry firing it, and eventually shooting it. Cooper's rules, or the 4 universal firearms rules. This is from John Cooper, who is a legendary US Marine. It states, number 1, all guns are always loaded. Number 2, never let the muzzle cover anything you aren't willing to destroy. Number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target. Number 4, identify your target and what is behind it. Each of these rules are vitally important on their own, and each rule must be consciously checked off before we put a bullet down range. As you progress through your skill set and your ability to maintain these firearm safety rules when you're operating and handling firearms, you'll find the ability in some contexts to check off these rules very quickly or sometimes simultaneously to be able to shoot your firearm quicker. That's not to say that these rules are being glossed over or taken lightly. It's more so that your skill set with a firearm has developed to such a high degree that it is ingrained and that you're able to subconsciously handle and operate the firearm in a safe manner. These rules are written and applied in a way that builds safety redundancies. It's a common thought that the top tier shooters are taking shortcuts on safety, or that very rigid firearm safety is only for beginners. As you progress, you'll find the opposite to be true. Even if you're an internationally renowned competition shooter, you will still get immediately disqualified from a match for breaking not only these rules, but all of the additional match safety rules as well. If we look at the tactical world, a common procedure for external safeties is to have them on at all times until the trigger is actively being depressed, and some units take it as far as to say that the safety is on during reloads and target transitions. So you'll see as skill progresses and the stakes are higher, the ability to abide by these 4 rules becomes even more important. Ingraining these rules allows accidents or mistakes to occur that are outside of our control without catastrophes following. So just for you, I've made an awesome acronym so we can remember all of these safety rules at all times when we are handling and operating firearms. And that acronym is OOMPH. U-M-F-F. OOMPH. OOMPH, which is the sound you or someone else will make if you screw this up. U, unload. Every firearm is always loaded. So to ensure that it is not loaded, we are going to unload it. So keeping this at the top of the 4 firearm safety rules ensures that we have the mindset that every firearm we come in contact with is loaded and we must unload it. Until proven otherwise, the firearm is loaded. Now that is a very key exception, because if I clear a firearm and I prove it safe, which we're going to get into very momentarily, once it is proven safe, it is safe and clear for me and me alone. There are no qualms when picking up a firearm or being handed a firearm from someone if you go and prove it safe yourself. It's expected in the firearms community that we are all keeping these firearm safety rules. And for that to happen, we all have to assume that the firearms are loaded at all times until proven otherwise. And that proven otherwise clause is very important, lest we sink into absurdity. Right? We wouldn't be able to dry fire with a loaded gun, because then it wouldn't be dry fire. We wouldn't be able to transport a loaded gun. We wouldn't be able to clean a loaded gun. So at some point we had to accept the fact that we have cleared that gun and it is safe for us. Now that's not safe for someone else. That's not even safe for me if I put it down and come back to it. Every time I leave control of my own firearm, I'm going to prove it safe and unload it. Number 2, never let your muzzle cover anything you aren't willing to destroy. An easy way to visualize this is to think of a laser emanating from your firearm's barrel. Like this. Look at that CGI. That's great CGI. This laser emanating from the barrel will melt and disintegrate anything it touches. The purpose of this laser is to remind us of the dangers of our muzzle direction. We have to keep our muzzle pointed in a safe direction at all times. For newer shooters, this is very difficult with a pistol. It's a little bit easier with a rifle because we have the distance of the barrel to stop us from making contact with ourselves or someone else. It's very easy when you're starting out with a pistol to forget that you have a firearm in your hands. So if I'm on a line talking to someone or I'm shooting and I turn to talk to them, I've just lazed all of you and I've burnt my very expensive camera. Or if I'm done shooting and I'm pointing at something in the distance or I'm trying to talk to someone, I'm making contact with that line of fire. Number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target. I'm going to go one further on that. Keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target and the decision to fire has been made. There's plenty of times where your sights will be aligned with the target, but you haven't made that decision to shoot yet. Now, until you are prepared to shoot, your finger should not be on the trigger. Now this is the golden rule of firearm safety. This one rule alone accounts for the majority of all inadvertent and negligent firearm discharges causing death. The estimation for annual deaths in the United States due to negligent discharges of firearms is approximately 430 deaths. So my finger stays along the side of the frame here. It doesn't stay in the trigger guard, it doesn't stay on the trigger, it stays along the side of the frame. That gives me quick access to the trigger if necessary, but it is not on the trigger. The danger of having your finger on the trigger is that the average startle and flinch response is greater in strength than any trigger pull weight in any firearm manufacturer. Meaning even if you have a strong double action trigger pull or 12-pound striker pull, your finger strength will overcome that easily if you startle or flinch. Now the reason why I've put the finger rule at number 3 instead of number 2 is because if I have my muzzle in an unsafe direction, i.e. pointed directly at somebody, and my finger is off the trigger, this can have catastrophic results. Conversely, if I'm pointed in a safe direction with my muzzle and my finger is on the trigger, even if the firearm discharges, it's in a safe direction, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm sure anyone would much rather have someone with their finger on the trigger pointed at a berm beside you rather than their finger off the trigger with a firearm pointed directly at you. And there's a reason for that. Number 4 is foreground. Now, the original firearm rule states identify your target and what is behind it. That doesn't give the full circumstance the weight it deserves. You must identify your target, what is in the immediate vicinity in front and behind the target. We do not fire into the darkness, we do not fire into the unknown. We identify our target before we pull that trigger. The foreground is just as important as the background. For instance, is the target moving? Is there any other people in the area that could move in front of the target? Do I have a line of fire that is safe now, and will it be safe by the time that I've pulled the trigger? For example, if I am the target and I'm on a busy street with people walking down the sidewalk behind me, the foreground and the background is changing constantly. You have to be confident that the bullet that you're launching from your firearm is going to meet its intended target and stop. If it's not clear behind the target and it's not clear in front of the target, we do not pull the trigger. I'm going to play a video here that I think drives this point home a little bit further. This is based on a real-life example that occurred in November 2020. Whether all the safety rules were followed, whether it's right or wrong, every time we pull this trigger, we're making a decision that we have to live with the rest of our lives.